My name's Robin Day. It's question time.
Oh, is it?
So, can you tell us what your name is and where you're from?
Well, Robin, my name is Neil Davidson.
And where are you from, Neil?
The last time I knew, I was from
Where were you born?
Where was I born?
Yeah.
Oh, I was born in Manchester.
Okay. You've got Alzheimer's, haven't you?
So they tell me.
Yeah. Do you remember when you first became aware of that?
Only when the doctors said it.
Okay. So is that something that you realised that you had? Did you realise that
Oh,
you
no,
were getting things?
no.
In all fairness, before he was actually diagnosed, he actually went to the doctor because he was having problems remembering things. And he actually asked her, he said to her, I think I've got Alzheimer's. Yes. And she said, well, if you had, the relatives would be bringing you, not yourself. But she said, if you have got memory issues, we'll look into it.
You know when you first had your Alzheimer's, did you know actually what it was? Because you went to the doctors,
No.
didn't you? And you said to them you were forgetting things. Did you know what dementia was back then?
No.
So when someone told you what it was, can you remember how you felt?
No, I think I was just confused.
And how does it make you feel now?
More confused. I think that the learning about it's complicated. Doesn't seem to matter.
Doesn't matter.
No, I mean, it's whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's something else, it's irrelevant because the overall thing is I can't remember stuff.
And how does that make you feel, not being able to remember?
Frustrated. Because it's something that I can't relate to.
Do you think it's affected Mary at all?
I would imagine so.
Okay. In what way do you think?
Well, you've got to keep thinking about, I must remember to tell him this, I must remember to tell him that. Sometimes I feel frightened.
And what do you feel frightened of, do you think?
Not being able to remember.
And how do you think you deal with that?
I just try and remember, but it's remembering what?
Do you know why you're here at the granary?
Because I've got Alzheimer's.
Okay, but why do you think you need to be here?
I've no idea, because the doctor said, put me here.
How does it feel living with Alzheimer's?
Initially, you don't really acknowledge you've got it.
Right.
You've got something, but you don't know what it is. I can't sit around and say, oh, I've got Alzheimer's. But then when you do realise you've got something and it's affecting your memory, that's when you start waking up to it. There's no point in denying. The sooner you accept it and acknowledge it, the better you'll deal with it. That's my view anyway.
He was an accountant, he had his own company, his own business. Well, that became extremely difficult because clients would phone in and they'd say, can you do X, Y, Z? And he'd go, yes. So he'd come off the phone, he hadn't got a clue what they'd said. So things got very difficult. Then he started getting lost. Then he lost his car for 2 weeks in Bristol. And eventually my sons and I managed to persuade him to give up his driving. But it's those sort of issues that are extremely difficult because they still think they can do all these things. So you have a constant battle and their personalities change, their attitudes change. And this is something that as a carer you have to be prepared to accept. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all because that is not the person you've lived with or been married to for many, many years. So yes, and he talks about things that he's done in the past, the jobs that he's had, you know, the places he's been to, family, cousins, things like that. But anything that's happened sort of up to perhaps a year ago, he doesn't remember. That is one of the most draining things, is asking the same question. Is that mine? Then, is that mine? Is that mine? You know, whatever it is, they just keep asking you the same question. A lot of the time he couldn't settle. Yes, he was eating and drinking and all this sort of time, but he didn't want to read in the end, he didn't want to watch television in the end, he didn't want to go to bed, he'd get up in the middle of the night. And these are all these issues that become, and if you say no to them, they get very, very aggressive. So you have to be very careful about how you go about things. Or you have to try and, how can I say, diffuse it in as much that you don't retaliate. It's very hard, it's a human nature. If someone's having a go at you, it's human nature to argue back. So I'd either just sit there very quietly, or I'd walk out the room and say, I'm going to make a cup of tea. And that would, because the art is trying to diffuse it or change the situation. I say, oh, I'll put the television on now. Well, sometimes I don't want to watch that. You know, you chuck the controls and this sort of thing. But you just have to find a way, and it's very difficult to give someone, say, well, do this, do that, because everybody's different. And I'd get arguments with him, I want my car keys, I want my car keys. And I say, well, what do you need your car keys for? I want my car keys. So I'd say, okay. But I'd stand and watch what he did. He had only opened the boot, goodness knows what he was looking for. But then he would give me the keys back. Because I said to him, if you don't, I made it very clear to him, you got in that car, I will phone the police. Because I couldn't not give them to him, because that would cause the situation to be even worse. But you just have to try and find ways that suit your situation. It's not easy. I'm only human, and any carer is human. And any carer here is human. There's only so much as a human you can take. You have to be, how can I say, very direct, very simple explanations about things. And I had a whiteboard like they've got over there, and I'd write what time I left, where I was going, and what time I would be back, so that he was able to, if you like, accept what I was doing. We had an exercise book, so I said, now write the questions down you want. So he wrote the questions down, and then we wrote the answers to all these sort of questions. And he'd say to me, where's my house? And I'd say, look at your book. And he'd open it, go, oh, I see, yeah, we sold it. And that took a lot of the pressure and stress and frustration of him and me. I had no qualms about telling people what he'd got. He didn't mind that. We had to move house in the middle of it all. I told the removal people, I told all the utilities companies, and I found if you're up front with them, if you're straight with them, they'll fall over backwards to help you. And if you tell people, they're far more understanding. The first port of call is the doctor. And then they refer you to a memory clinic and they do all the testing. But it took quite some time for them to actually come back and say exactly what the problem was. They kept saying it was mild memory loss. They do MRI scans, CT scans and all this sort of thing. But it does take quite a bit of, because some of the testings they do, which is sort of based on sort of memories and things like that, don't give a clear picture. And it can be very confusing for them. And they also ask me questions as well. I have to do a test every time I go with him. So it isn't an easy, how can I say, diagnosis. I mean, it took about 18 months before they finally came back and said definitely it was Alzheimer's. And then they diagnosed again that it was vascular as well. I phoned the council, they helped me fill in all the financial forms, because all the forms are quite absolutely mind-blowing. And if you've not into that sort of thing, it can be. They were very helpful. The Alzheimer's were very helpful. As I say, the council. Also, fortunately, my older son had a very close friend who could do all the power of attorney. He did all that for me, sent it to the courts. I have a financial advisor who helps me fill in certain forms if I need to. But you have to ask. He became violent. He became very aggressive. And he actually tried to kill me, which we don't talk about because he gets upset. He doesn't remember doing it, and it was a terrible time. Fortunately, being such a fit person, I was able to stop him. If I hadn't been, I doubt very much I'd be sitting here, because he was a very physically strong man. And I phoned the council social services straight away and said, look, I can't deal with this. I really can't deal with this anymore because I don't know when he's going to do it again. Because there's no reason. They can flip. There's nothing that will start it. They can just flip. And so they organised for me within, I must say, fantastically quickly. And I came and looked at the granary on a Saturday. I phoned the council on the Monday, and he was in by the Friday. And I had to tell my sons, and that's the worst thing anyone has to do, is to tell your children that their father has tried to kill their mother. And he was sitting in the chair. I was telling my youngest son on the phone, he was on holiday in Devon. And I turned around, he's crying. He realised what I was saying. He realised what I was telling my son. And he said, I can't believe I did that. Nobody blames him because they know it's not him, it's the disease that causes all this. So everyone you speak to feel the same way. In the end, I just couldn't do it any longer because I was frightened. When you're living in that environment, you don't know when it's going to happen again. No one wants him to be in here, but what's the solution? There isn't any other solutions. Relief. I know it sounds quite sad, really, but the relief, I counted the days before he came. I know it sounds terrible, but I'd got to a point that I could not do it any longer. And the relief and the fact that the staff are so lovely, so caring, so supportive, and it's so close to where I live as well. I can come at any time, there's no restrictions, he's well cared for, he's quite happy now. We had lots of problems, as Alison knows, to begin with, which is not uncommon. I want to come home every 2 minutes, but that has died down. And he's very, very, I wouldn't say he's happy. Nobody's happy, are they, if they're not in their own home? But as it is now, I think he's settled and he's as happy as he can be with the circumstances and the condition that he's got. He has a very good relationship with Alison, and that is what I'm so pleased about. And with a lot of the other staff, he interacts with her very well. He doesn't know when I say Alison. He doesn't know that, but he recognises her face. He recognises her. If I say, oh, how's Alison? And he looks at me blank. But when he sees her, he goes, oh yes, and he says to me, she makes me feel safe. You know, so that to me is worth everything. That he's happy, he's safe, he's well looked after, he's cared for. Obviously, he's still my husband, I still love him, I still care about him. But I had to accept he's never coming home. We're never going to do things together, so we have to find a common ground to carry on that relationship. So you just have to change how you are with them. You know, he's still my husband, I still care about him, but there's not that husband-wife relationship anymore. There never will be, and I accept that. Sometimes he just wants to sit, and I just sit and hold his hand. And he's happy with that, and I'm happy with that. I used to stay for a lot longer. I'd stay for 2 hours or plus, and I found it quite draining, and he did as well. So now I cut the visits down. I'd rather come less for less time, but more often. I would say to people who husbands or wives have Alzheimer's is that try and get as much help and support as you can, and when it comes to it, you have to accept. It gets to a point where you cannot manage, and it's no reflection on you. It took me a long time to accept that, and the family got very cross with me because I kept feeling guilty that I'd put him in here. And they kept saying, don't feel guilty, you did everything. And that's something everybody has to come to terms with individually. But you have to look at the bigger picture, because there's a lot of them and they're only on an 8-hour shift. You're on a 24-hour shift. And if you get ill, if a carer gets ill and can't look after them, what's going to happen to them? So you have to be realistic. So I would always say to people, try and find out as much information as you can. And there is information out there. Holding Thea, okay? Bless her, yes. And those are the pictures Sophia did for you for Grandad. All right? Yeah. Okay? And Alistair said when he's got some more done, because she's bigger than that now.